One of the most exciting new updates in Ableton Live 12 is a synthesizer called Meld. It comes with some wavetables and noise generators that are brand new and are absolutely insane. Today we're going to take a look at Meld and how we can utilize this in our own workflow to create some really interesting and unique sounds. So we are here in Ableton 12 and we are looking at our brand new synthesizer Meld. So what Meld actually is it's considered a bitimbral macro oscillator synth. So what that basically means is we have two oscillators on top of each other, A and B, followed by a series of different modulators, filters, and effects to reach the final output. The first section we have is oscillator A and B. These have the same oscillators within them. We have a number of ones that are brand new to Ableton that are very cool. We'll touch on those shortly. The next section is referred to as engines. These are two different knobs that are going to change depending on what oscillator we have selected, so we can modulate those oscillators. The next section is going to be our envelope section. We have a master envelope section for our volume, and then we also have an envelope section for modulation. As well, we have two LFO sections, LFO1 and then an LFO specifically for effects. We have a big matrix that can be expanded to full screen so we can see what we're modulating. We have some MIDI settings, some MPE settings, and we have both of these settings for both oscillator A and oscillator B. The next section we have is two different filter sections. Note that these oscillators are running parallel with each other, so each of these filters are still affecting the in particular oscillator. Again, we have some settings here that are going to change depending on which filter we have selected. The next section gives us some mixing controls such as panning. We have a bipolar tone control, a fader, a master limiter, and then in the final section we have some voicing options and some master volume options. Before we get into any of these sections, the first thing we're going to touch on is scale mode. So scale mode is a feature that's new to Ableton 12. Basically what it allows you to do is select any scale, and Ableton's going to utilize the scale to affect several different aspects of Ableton 12 and show you in MIDI view which notes are within your scale and which ones are not. The way this integrates with this particular device is if we go to settings, we have a number of options here. Oscillator key tracking, oscillator, and filter. So when we have particular oscillators or filters selected, we're getting tonal values out of them. If we have these selected, these tonal values are going to stay within key. Let me show you what I mean. So any of these oscillators with the flats and sharp symbol next to them, these are all going to apply for this setting. So let's try swarm sine. So notice as we increase the spacing, all of our tones are locking directly to our scale we have selected, which in my case is D minor. If we turn this off, we no longer have our tone locked within our scale. The same applies for filters. So if we select one of these filters with the flats and sharp symbol on it, now it's going to lock the tonal aspect of this filter right into key. One more thing to note about scale mode is if we come over here and we turn off the master scale mode, this SD is going to turn to an ST. Basically what's happening is it's going from semitones to scale tones. So ST means this is on semitones, and if we come back here and click this, now it's on scale tones. With that understanding, let's go ahead and hop into some of the oscillators. Some of these oscillators are very unique, and as I mentioned before, they are brand new to Ableton. So the first one we have is going to be our basic shapes, which is just a sine wave slowly moving to a square wave. Dual basic shapes is going to give us two of these concurrent with each other. And then we have unique ones like swarm sine, which are multiple sine waves. Another one that I've grown really fond of is fold FM, which almost sounds like FM synthesis. It's basically waves folding. One that I think is going to be really popular with our dub stuff guys is squelch. It's almost like a yoy. With ones like simple FM, we have the ratio control here, which is engaging the FM index. Chip is similar to a pulse width. And then we have Shepherd's Pie, which is the Shepherd tone effect, which is very cool that they decided to implement that in this synthesizer. Tarp is a great one for synthesizing kicks. Bit grunge is almost like a redux. And then we have some pretty unique noise generators like crackle, which is like a vinyl crackle. Rain, which is a really cool one. And then bubble, which has a similar effect. Again, all very cool, all very unique. And whenever we change one of these, we're going to have alternating controls in the engine section. So let's get a basic shape to start working with so we can enter the envelopes and the LFOs. One thing that I really like about these new sets of envelopes is the ability to slope them. So for instance, if we move this down, so we're doing like a pluck, we actually have the ability to come in here on D-slope and change the slope of the decay. Same goes for the attack slope and the release slope. Very cool features. Up here, we have a number of different selections for how we want this envelope to work. We can have it triggered, we can have it on loop, or we can have it on AD loop. This next envelope is dedicated just for your modulations, so you are free to map this to whatever you would like. Again, we have similar controls. We do have these controls down here, which are also pretty cool. So we can select an initial start point and a final start point that doesn't necessarily have to be at 0. And again, we have these selections here for trigger, loop, and AD loop. The next section we have is our LFOs. So we have LFO1 and we have an LFO1 effects. So they're basically giving us our own separate envelopes and LFOs specifically of 4 effects, and then a first one to map to whatever we'd like. Again, down here they give us some really unique controls as far as our LFOs go. We have a basic shape LFO, so this is going to be your basic sine wave LFO. And then if we come down here, we have some very unique ones. So we have ramp. So let's map this to something so we can hear what we're doing here. So it's similar to the filters, similar to the oscillators. Depending on whatever LFO we have selected, it's going to give us different options. So here we have ramp, and we have some selections here: rate, shape, slope. Then we have wander, which is a little bit sporadic. Alternate. Euclid. And pulsate, which seems to be entirely random. And we even have a selection that gives us chance. So similar to the envelopes, LFO1 and LFO1 effects, they actually have different modulators. So over here under effects 1, we actually have a number of different and unique modulators for effects. The next section we have is going to be the matrix. And my favorite part about this matrix is now Ableton gives us the flexibility to open up our plugin. And now we have this just gigantic life-size matrix right in front of us where we can do intricate mapping and see everything we're working on. It's very cool. So finally, as if LFO1 and LFO1 effects weren't enough, they give us a third, or as they put it, a second LFO, which has some basic options: sine, tri, saw up, saw down, rectangle, and random. We can also set this LFO based on hertz or song tempo. This little R down here is going to be our retrigger mode, and this is phase offset. We had already talked about most of these settings in here. One we didn't talk about was the portamento. So we have portamento, which is going to be our glide between notes. but one we didn't talk about was glissando. So glissando is similar to portamento in that it's gliding notes up to the note you selected, so it gives you that nice and steady curve. However, this is also something that tracks from scale mode, where it's going to transpose up or down to the note you are moving to based on the tones in that scale. Very cool. So coming over here to our filters, we have two different filters. Again, both of these oscillators still at this point are running in parallel. So we have a filter for oscillator A as well as oscillator B. They have some really unique and cool filters that I am used to seeing in a number of different third-party plugins and synthesizers. However, I have not seen some of these utilized in Ableton yet, so it's very cool to see something like the comb filter, the plate resonator, low-pass crunch, low-pass switched, and filler, which is basically like an aggressive low-pass filter. And as we mentioned before, again, these different settings are going to change depending on the filter we have selected. So if we have comb plus selected, we have feedback, dampening, and then we have our frequency. Then if we move to Redux, we now have Crush and Lo-Fi. The cool part about these is with this big flexible matrix they give us, we can map these filters to any LFO or envelope source. Moving on to our mix section, we have the basic pan left to right. And this tone control is actually a bipolar tone control. What that's mean is when it's set to positive, so when we move right, the low frequencies will be reduced. And when it's set to negative, so if we go left, the high frequencies will be reduced. So I think of it almost as a shelf where we're shelving or lowering the volume of the highs and the lows, but not necessarily filtering them. I really like how they gave us a visual fader here. So, if we're coming out hot or it's too quiet, we can use this to move up or down. And I really appreciate also the built-in limiter. If we're doing some crazy sound design and we're absolutely clipping and through the roof, we can just limit it so we don't have problems coming out of the synthesizer. Over here, we have a choice for polyphonic or monophonic. So we can select how many voicings we want to have. This would be in mono, and then we can go to polyphonic. We can move all the way up to 12 voicings if we'd like. Stacking, again, is adding some more voicings. And then last, we have a drive output, so we can crank the drive if we came in a little quiet, and then a master volume. So these are the basic functions of Meld. It's very powerful, and I think a lot can be done with this. It will be out with Ableton 12, which as of now we're expecting around February, and I can't wait to see what you all do with it.